Napster versus Metallica, a tale as old as time. If you're a metalhead and especially a Metallica fan, there's no doubt you've heard of the Napster versus Metallica lawsuit.
Napster. Sharing's only fun when it's not your stuff.
I'm certain you've heard of the Lars Ulrich greedy accusations.
You know what? Maybe I wouldn't have to whore myself out if you kids didn't steal my music.
The public opinion on this lawsuit and Metallica has shifted so many times over the years, and today we're really going to break it down and we're going to do a deep dive on how this lawsuit went. First, I'm going to give a sort of unbiased retelling and recap of the whole situation, and then afterwards I'm going to give my opinions on everything that happened and where we stand today. It's been 25 years since this case was settled, so it's kind of interesting to think about how much the internet has changed since then, how much the music industry has changed, and how people's perception of artists have evolved over the years. My name's Katie, by the way. I'm a metalhead who likes to be a nerd on the internet, so if you're interested in metal and music reviews and horror movies and video games and all sorts of different things, check out my channel. Make sure you subscribe, like this video if you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's get into the story of Napster versus Metallica. Napster was first founded in 1999 by Sean and John Fanning, as well as Sean Parker, as a peer-to-peer file sharing service. The original concept was to create a platform where users could share music files, particularly MP3s, with friends for free. As you can imagine, Napster became extremely popular at lightning speed. People loved the idea of having music so easily accessible to them. People were sharing music, they were using it to burn CDs, which is, I can't believe that's a thing of the past now. Essentially, Napster became a household name in a matter of months, and this comes at a time in the internet where it was fairly new for a lot of people, and up to this point in the music industry, the only way to hear a new song was either on the radio, or you would have to go to a record store and buy a record or a cassette or a CD. The music industry had a much tighter grasp on how their music was released. You know, it was all about the record labels controlling everything. Nothing got leaked on the internet up to this point. You know, it wasn't even really a thing until Napster made it a thing. And when it comes to the file sharing, a lot of people had a whole community of friends that they would share cassette tapes or CDs with and go back and forth and try new music. You know, they'd be like, check out this one. This is a new band that I found. And then they'd give it to their friend and they'd swap out. And this was the most that we had music sharing up to this point. So Napster, as you can see, changed everything. Music lovers were so excited to have all this music at their fingertips and be able to share it with their friends, all for free. So let's talk about the financial aspect of all of this. Up until this point, most artists relied heavily on their music sales to make a living. Selling those physical copies was a huge part of a musician's income. So now with Napster on the scene, a lot of artists were concerned about how they were going to make a living. You know, they had touring and merchandise, but they were going to take a huge pay cut from their music sales. Most artists didn't really feel like they could stand up for themselves. They were very overwhelmed with the idea of the internet being such a huge new thing. They felt like they didn't really have a way to combat it. And then enter Metallica.
Where's my name? You're on MTV, man.
Again?
First, let's talk about where Metallica was in their career. So this was in 1999, and this is fresh off of their rebranding era. You know, you got the load and reload hard rock era, Kirk and Lars making out all the time for some reason, short hair, which for some reason people hated, nipple piercings and guy liner. You know, it was a strange time for Metallica and for being a Metallica fan. A lot of Metallica fans were already frustrated with the band at this point. You know, it was the whole, I mean, things people still say to this day, like, you're nothing without Cliff, Dave, Jason, whatever, you know, the list goes on forever. And a lot of people didn't even like the new hard rock sound that they had done on Load and Reload. We want thrash! Everything started one fateful day when Lars Ulrich noticed that Metallica's song I Disappear had been leaked online on Napster without the band's knowledge or consent. Lars was very frustrated with this being just taken from them, essentially stolen. At this time, there was such thing as intellectual property rights, and it was all protected by law, But it was such a new fight that people just didn't know how to win. Lars was the most vocal member of Metallica about his disdain for Napster and file sharing in general.
If the record company bosses don't take the money, then the internet people are going to somebody's going to profit off this. And if it's not the artist, then you're profiting illegal. It's bulletproof. I mean,
all right, it's bulletproof, meaning what? Meaning that the argument.
I mean, who can argue with that?
All right.
He thought it was a violation of artists' rights, and he thought artists deserve compensation for their work. Lars has also always been known as the more business-minded member of the group. He's always been the one that handles those sides of things with the finances and other big decisions in the corporate sort of side of the band.
You know, when you say it's not about the money,
it's not about the money now.
When you say it's not about the money, somebody says it's about the money. You know, it's always true. When somebody says it's not about the money, somebody says it's about the money.
That can also be my counter argument. Yeah. People sit there and go, it's about greed for Metallica, but it's also a reversible greed because you're just as greedy because you don't want to pay $16 for a CD. That's the marketplace.
Well, good point. Let me finish this point, though.
But let's be honest, Lars was not the best poster child to have for this movement. You know, even if people were passionate about artists' rights and intellectual property rights and compensation for the artists, I think Lars was the wrong guy to lead it. He had already sort of gotten the title of being the greedy one, like I said, because he was the businessman guy, very business-minded. And then we have the whole situation with Jason. People don't like him because they thought he was an asshole for the way they treated Jason. Rightfully so, in the Justice era, by basically turning down all of the bass on the mix of And Justice for All. So people just really didn't like Lars all that much at this point. Some people argued that Lars didn't actually care about other musicians. He only cared about Metallica and how much money they were making. You know, Lars tried to paint it as he wanted to be the voice for other artists because Metallica was so big in the industry, they would have a lot more power. Some people didn't believe that.
That if there's some fans out there that are going to be alienated because you're out front leading the fight, you're saying goodbye.
Bye-bye.
We got enough fans.
If you don't have enough,
we can spare a few.
No, it's not even that, Charlie. It's if you don't have enough respect for the fact that I believe this way and that I have a right to challenge it and try and write it for what's right for me, I don't want you as a fan.
In April of the year 2000, yeah, they were really starting off that century strong. Metallica filed a lawsuit against Napster for copyright infringement. Metallica's argument was that Napster was allowing illegal piracy without compensating artists for their work. Metallica argued that artists should have more control over when and where their music is distributed. They were also seeking monetary damages from Napster as well as a full shutdown of the platform. So that's a pretty hefty lawsuit right there, and this is Metallica versus Napster, not Lars Ulrich versus Napster. But like I said before, Lars was kind of the poster child of this movement, and he did all of the talking on the stand throughout the court case. The rest of the band was backing him up, but this was mostly Lars pulling the levers.
Information does not want to be free. Only the transmission of information wants to be free. Information, like culture, is the result of a labor and devotion, investment and risk. It has a value, and nothing will lead to a more deafening cultural silence than ignoring that value and celebrating companies like Napster running amok.
Music fans were not happy with this lawsuit.
Like, good afternoon, my name is, Lars Ulrich from Metallica. I worked for years to get where I am today. Years and years of playing clubs and recording demo tapes. Me and my buddy, James Hetfield here, have shed blood, sweat, and motherfucking beer to get where we are today.
Beer! Good!
And now we're fucking wealthy beyond, belief.
A lot of people were saying, get with the times, old man. You can't be stuck in the past forever. This is the future. The internet was this new thing, and people wanted to see technology evolve and grow and give us new things. This change was inevitable, and that we would just have to move along with the times.
And people will say just this point. You talk about there's a new technological development, that what you guys are trying to do is stop technology, and you can't do that. And there's no way you can do that.
And we're aware of that, of course. So what we're trying to do is, as the first artist, to basically come forward and set our foot down and say, wait a minute, time out for 1 second. Let's just sit down and deal with this and try and get both a public debate going on how to control this for the future, and also, in the course of the legal forum, to try and go after Napster and show to the other upstart companies out there that provide similar services that if you're going to do this, you're going to have people like Metallica with very deep pockets who are very tenacious and very emotionally involved in trying to fight this on your back all the time, and whether that's something that you want to continue pursuing, basically.
This wasn't just from general music fans either. This criticism came from a lot of Metallica fans who were actually burning their albums during this trial, which is insane to me. That just goes to show people are very passionate about their music and they don't want it to be messed with. This also did not help with the greedy accusations against Lars.
You've got such deep pockets. Music has been so good to you. You've
Absolutely.
made so much music that so many people love. Why worry if a few people get a few free copies?
Well, it's really not. I mean, right now it's not about the money. It's really about the control and about the future. The money that's being lost right now in this revenue is pocket change. It's really about, to me, the core issue is sort of people's perception of the internet, people's perception of what their rights are as a internet user, and in how it relates to intellectual property. You got the most extreme people sitting right now going, anything that comes through the internet, through my computer is mine to own, and I have the right to it. And that type of train of thought, I think, is very, very dangerous. It does not just affect musicians, it affects anybody who creates any type of original work. And that is something that really has to be dealt with.
This was in an era that a lot of people were calling Metallica sellouts, especially after the Black album. People just saw them as going soft and caring more about record sales and radio-friendly stuff than actually being metal, which is a fair criticism. Metallica does have some of the highest record sales of all time of any band ever, especially Black album, Load and Reload. They did so well, so maybe they could kind of understand how big of a cut they were going to be taking if file sharing became the new way people consumed music. But it also makes sense that a lot of fans would be sort of turned off by this monetary gain and kind of see them as sellouts who only cared about money. While some fans were really pissed off, other fans were a little bit more reasonable and they wanted a balance of fair compensation for artists as well as easier access to music, because a lot of people couldn't afford to just buy an album every single time some new music came out. You know, it was even pricey back then, and people wanted there to be some sort of middle ground. So Metallica's biggest point was that they wanted fair compensation for artists, and they believed the best way to do this was by shutting down Napster and file sharing entirely so people just couldn't steal music that wasn't theirs. Very cut and dry solution. The case lasted about 4 months, and then in July 2000, the court came to a decision. The court ultimately ruled against Napster, forcing the platform to block access to all unauthorized music. So at this point, they were saying unless this artist specifically uploaded their music themselves to this platform and allowed it to be shared freely, no copyright issues, that was okay. But any band that didn't give their file to that platform with their consent, you had to take it down. It wasn't allowed. The court found Napster liable for copyright infringement and claimed that Napster had not taken the adequate steps to prevent copyright violations. In short, what Napster was allowing was illegal, and they got in trouble for it. Very simple. This was the law already. You can't go against intellectual property rights and take what isn't yours and share it on the internet. That's just how it was, and it kind of is supposed to be that way still today. However, the court did not rule that Napster had to take down their platform. Like I said, they can have authorized music on their platform, but pretty much they sucked the fun out of what Napster was for the listeners. You know, all the good music wasn't going to be there anymore. And they told Napster that they had to come up with some sort of filter system to prevent the unauthorized music from getting through. And this is where we start getting those weird MP3 files that they would try to get past the copyright violations. People would upload a certain song that was copyrighted, but they would edit it a bunch. You'd have like a bunch of weird sound effects and the Bill Clinton speech.
My fellow Americans, I would once again like to say that I did not have sexual relations with that woman. I did, however, go to ifreeclub.com, where they offer hundreds of free products.
I cannot believe that was a thing. Like, so many people that use Napster and other platforms like it probably have downloaded an MP3 file, and once they actually listened to it, they were highly disappointed because it wasn't what they were expecting at all. And you would just get a bunch of these really butchered, weird versions of songs that you tried to download. So ultimately, even though people tried every single way they possibly could to bypass the unauthorized music block, it failed at the end of the day. It wasn't working, and the court saw that. In 2001, the court ruled that Napster shut down their operations entirely. Napster went on to go bankrupt in 2002, and then they sold to Roxio, who who rebranded the platform as a subscription music streaming service, very much the predecessor of Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube Music and all of the platforms we use today. So this was a huge step in the direction towards listeners have easier access to music, but artists still get paid for it. And this stuff is very important with the way that we consume music today. So in a way, this court case kind of helped us get the platforms that we all love so much now. So I guess there's a silver lining here and there. I mean, just think about how great current day music streaming platforms are, such as Spotify or Apple Music. It's easier than ever to access music these days, as well as explore and find other things within your taste, especially with their really impressive algorithms. I've found so many of my favorite bands through Spotify, and it's so finely tuned to my tastes. It's easier to listen to music than ever. And these platforms nowadays do pay their artists, but some people argue that it's not quite enough. So let's break down how much Spotify, for example, pays their musicians. So the most up-to-date number that I could find is that Spotify pays between 0.003 cents to 0.005 cents per stream. So for example, if you had 1,000 streams on your song, that's between $3 and $5. Or 1,000,000 streams would be between $3,000 and $5,000. Now this rate really depends on a lot of different factors. So one of them would be the location that you're in or what type of accounts were listening to your music. I know that they pay a little bit of a higher rate if the listen is coming from a premium account. Some would argue that this isn't enough money at all. Some people are okay with it. I don't know. That's kind of a topic for another day. But one problem you run into is if a band or an artist is with a record label, this pay doesn't go directly to them. It goes to the record label and it's distributed among tons of different people that got that song on that platform. So I guess for an independent artist, they would take that full check. But if you're in a bigger band with a record label, you're probably hardly seeing any of your streaming money. The payment that the artist would receive under a record label would just depend on how many rights holders there are for the music and really what the record label decides the artist is going to be paid based on their contracts. One of the ways that artists have had to evolve and change the way they make their sales these days is relying more on selling merchandise and touring. Usually at this point, streaming sales, music sales are an afterthought. Physical media has started coming back in a way with the vinyl records and the collectibles, and think of someone like Taylor Swift. She has like 50 versions of every album, and that's definitely a cash cow. So people still are buying physical media, but let's be real, most people are getting a huge portion of their music from a streaming platform. So Napster was somewhat of a predecessor of these sorts of platforms, the paid subscription services where the artists do get paid, but like I said, some people argue that the payment is not nearly enough. Let's be real, you're still able to illegally download music these days. We still got those illegal options and a lot of people still use them. And there's like tons of websites out there that still work the way that Napster did, or maybe even better now. But support your artists. You know, I think it's very important to buy tickets to your favorite artist shows and buy their merchandise and support them because they're not making anything off their streaming.
Does Lars regret the way in which he handled Napster back in the day? It said the music industry has lost billions not harnessing the power of tech between, during, and after Napster.
No, I'm not a guy who sort of carries regret around with me on my shoulders a lot. I'd say the only regret about that 13 years ago was that we were not quite prepared. I think you used the word shit before, so I'll say we weren't quite prepared for the shitstorm that sort of that we became engulfed in. You know, the Napster people were really smart in that they made the whole fight about, you know, about money and about, you know, Metallica are sort of like technologically inept and they don't want to, you know, give stuff away for free. And we're like, well, hang on, it's not about money, it's about control.
But
whose choice should it be? We were saying it should be our choice. If we want to give our stuff away, we'll give our stuff away. I mean, that's a no-brainer, but that should be our choice. It just feels like me being the poster child for that always felt a little odd. It seemed like somebody like, I don't know, Sting or somebody should, you know, like, they're better at that stuff than me. I don't take any credit for anything. Like I said, I'm proud of that we stood up for what we believed in. Metallica has always been, we've been very impulsive. There are obviously people that have, you know, when they hear the word Metallica, just like we're sitting here talking 15 minutes in, the Napster thing comes up. So I'd say in every 5th interview I do these days, there's a Napster 3-minute conversation in there. I mean, it's as, you know, it's like it'll be part of my obituary. You know, it's like it'll be in the first 5 sentences of my obituary, and I sort of accept that, for better or worse. I mean, in my life, it's a footnote, but in some people's perception of who I am and what Metallica is, I understand that it's a big thing, and I accept that.
So now it's time for me to give my own opinion on this situation. So what I think is that this lawsuit helped maybe soften the blow of what was inevitable. You know, with the internet and the way that everything was evolving with technology, it was bound to happen. People were going to find ways to rip music files and share them on the internet, regardless of what you do. No matter how many lawsuits you do, people were always going to get away with it, you know. But this helped soften the blow a little bit to create the legal platforms that we have today. And I personally think they should be paying artists much, much more per stream than they do. There's been so many times that I found a new band that I love so much, and then it just snowballs into this huge thing where I'm a huge fan and I spend money on them in different ways. So you could say that that's a good benefit of these platforms. You know, it's more exposure for artists to get more fans. At the end of the day, it's a very nuanced conversation, and I still don't have a full, solid, solidified, concrete opinion on it just yet. Overall, I do very much understand Metallica's stance on the whole situation. Whether we want to say that they did this for themselves selfishly, or if they took on a leadership role and did this for all artists around the world, that can be your own opinion. I don't really know what their intentions were, but at the end of the day, they really did lead a movement towards somewhat of the right direction to protect artists the most that they could. I think copyright stuff is important, as annoying as it is sometimes to not have everything at our fingertips. And, you know, I've gotten copyright claims on this channel constantly, and it can be annoying. I understand that, but I do see where they were coming from. You know, they were oldies. They came from a time where it was cut and dry. You buy the music, you listen to the music. It just wasn't like that anymore. They were worried about probably their own pockets, as well as maybe others. I don't know.
Who knows why a guy does that? I mean, does he have enough money? Probably, right?
I also just very much understand the criticism from fans as well. It does suck to get something like that just ripped out from under you. Something so fun, and people were having such a good time. Even for me, I was a kid a little bit later, like 2005 to 2010. People were using LimeWire a lot. That was a big part of my childhood, was like illegally downloading music and burning it onto a CD and making mixtapes, you know. That stuff was so fun. So I can see why people were so angry. Overall, I think the lawsuit sort of worked out for the better. I'm kind of leaning on the side of I think Lars was right about Napster. There is a side of the spectrum of Lars is super greedy and he should never have done this lawsuit. You know, I'm kind of like, I'd say if this is Lars was right, I'm like here on the scale. You know what I mean? I'm more on that side. But it's very nuanced, like I said. But let me know your opinions on this matter in the comments down below. Let me know any sort of things that I might have missed in this lawsuit that you want to let me know about. But anyways, that is all for my Napster versus Metallica discussion. So like I said, let me know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed today's video. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!